So I know this is a topic that may rub a few people up the wrong way, but I must admit, I think there's a very good argument to be made that two of the standout fighters set to compete on UFC 273 are the very best in the sport. And look, that might be a hasty opinion to throw out there, especially with the dominance of Kamaru Usman atop the welterweight division. Based on the pound-for-pound list's criteria, yes, I do believe that Usman is the rightful owner of that top spot. But if we're talking about the greatest fighter on the planet, the most technical, the most well-rounded, the fighter who has shown themselves to be superior on one night or on many against the greatest level of opposition, well, if we're talking about it like that, and if I'm being totally honest, my pick could well fall somewhere between Petr Yan and Alexander Volkanovski. In the conversation right now, for me, you have to of course include Usman, Adesanya, Yan, Volkanovski, Ngannou, and maybe some of you will disagree, but I would still put Max Holloway, and maybe even Robert Whittaker and Charles Oliveira in that discussion. Those 8 fighters, for me, represent the greatest active MMA athletes in the men's divisions under the UFC banner in terms of, above all other things, their skill levels and of course their resume. I think the likes of Holloway and Whittaker are in the unenviable position of being in a division that also contains one of the other names I've listed. But in their most recent fight with the champion, they did manage to prove that they're on that level. And while I could go through each fighter's resume and give reasons for and against their inclusion within that number, in the interest of keeping this video to the point and relevant, all I will tell you right now is that I do believe that there is a case to be made for both Petr Yan and Alexander Volkanovski as the single greatest example of a mixed martial arts fighter on this planet. I also think that there's a case to be made that both are superior to Kamaru Usman in terms of the fighter that turns up in the cage and competes, even if they don't yet have the title defenses to show for it. And I find it interesting to see that both men are competing at UFC 273 in fights that are expected to serve as more of a double down on what we already know, instead of a legacy-defining challenge. And that of course goes with no disrespect intended to Aljamain Sterling or Korean Zombie. It just does seem like these fights will serve the purpose of moving the division on to its next stage, with Volkanovski's ideal next opponent being Max Holloway, and Petr Yan's being whoever emerges within the extremely stacked bantamweight title picture. That's not to say that the underdogs here aren't capable of springing an upset, because trust me, I'm a huge fan of both, and I do think that Chan Sung Jung is a threat, and in particular, Aljamain Sterling is actually quite underrated. But I suppose the purpose of this video, and trust me it's pretty loose, just happened to come around because of a question that I posed to myself about the current pound for pound rankings. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content and would like to stay up to date with all of our weekly uploads, be sure to subscribe to the channel now, even if we are potentially about to reach the end of an era, with Aljamain Sterling's title reign and all of the jokes that have come with it in real danger of winding down. Also, we recently set up a Patreon account, so if you want to help support the channel, the link is in the description. I will let you in on a little secret. If you were to put a gun to my head before asking me who the single best fighter on the planet is, I'd say Petr Yan. And that's a pick that for me went from suspicion around the Jose Aldo fight to all-out confirmation when he managed to beat Corey Sandhagen. And while the criteria that is being used to single out Kamaru Usman for the number 1 spot absolutely justifies his ranking, there is a real part of me that feels like Alexander Volkanovski is right up there. And a lot of this is the eye test coming into play, and the knowledge of who these guys are doing it against. I would go as far as to say that Volkanovski's pair of victories over Max Holloway, over a narrowly contested 10 rounds, are as good a pair of performances at that level as any fighter in the sport possesses today. And yeah, those fights, and in particular their second fight, was incredibly tight. But that doesn't take away from the level that Volk had to get to. In fact, everything Max has done in his last 4 fights, the pair with Volkanovski, his masterful drubbing of Calvin Kattar, and his instant classic against Yair Rodriguez, that only serves to make the fact that Volkanovski won 6 rounds potentially that bit more impressive. Like, he did that against that guy. And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. And it's the same with Petr Yan. I think his wins over top 5 guys like Corey Sandhagen, Jose Aldo, as well as what was on the cusp of happening against Sterling, given the quality of the bantamweight division, those are some serious performances. And sure, none of them have the status of a Max Holloway, but again, it was the dominance, the eye test, especially as each fight started to wear into its later stages. Again, I don't really have a conclusive argument to bring to you here, but I would say that no fighter in the sport looks as good to me, at the highest level, as Petr Yan does. Just like in the pantheon of A-level wins, Usman over Colby, Israel over Whittaker, Francis over Stipe, I don't think that any of those are in a tier above Volkanovski's victories over Holloway. Equal, yes, but that's an A1 level victory right there, from a fighter who has that air of greatness. And of course, I expect both men to win in quite comfortable fashion at UFC 273. And of course, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in declaring anything that hasn't yet happened. But while I don't see the official rankings showing it just yet, I do expect one of these men to solidify themselves in my mind as the sport's pound for pound number 2, behind the long championship reign of Kamaru Usman. I don't even know if I'm explaining this well, but do let me know in the comment section below if you agree with my opinion on either guy. Call it speculative, but I've always preferred to be a bit looser with my own pound for pound criteria, and these two fighters are just about as good as it gets in this sport. But how do you see these two title fights playing out? Do let us know your opinions in the comment section below. We always love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thank you for watching.